Welcome to the show where we unearth new ways of looking at ever-evolving life around the world, seen from a number of different industries, cultures, and backgrounds. But there's one thing that unites everyone I speak to. They all want to do their part to make the world better in their own unique ways. It's a uniting passion. Whether they're from the commercial world, third sector, or public sector, from the global north or the global south, my name is Philippa White, and welcome to TIE Unearthed. Hello, and welcome to episode 38 of TIE Unearthed. Today, I'm speaking with my friend and powerhouse social entrepreneur and change maker, Caren McNamara, founder and CEO of Conscious Container, a benefit corporation bringing the refillable glass bottle marketplace back into the U.S. economy. And today we'll be talking about the incredible power of this reusable system. Now, many of you will probably remember years ago that the return and reuse of glass bottles was common practice. However, when convenience began to dominate the messaging around packaging, this went straight out the window. Some countries have returned to the reuse system, but the US seems to be well behind the curve, meaning that 75% of glass bottles end up in landfills. Caren is doing everything in her power to change this. Today, we talk of the vital importance of this reuse glass system. We touch on supply chain issues, the impact on carbon emissions, and the financial benefits. We hear of the surprising challenges she has faced along the way and the exciting next phase of this game-changing adventure. You will get goosebumps listening to this episode, so grab that favorite beverage or throw on those running shoes and enjoy this chat with Caren. Hi, Caren. It is lovely to have you with us today. Thank you for joining TIE Unearthed. How are you?
I am doing well, Philippa. So wonderful to see and hear you.
Yeah, it's so great to see you as well. It really is. It's wonderful to have you here. Tell everyone, please, before we get into Conscious Container and everything, I'd just love you to please bring to life you and your background.
All right, where to start?
Yeah.
So first of all, thank you so much for inviting me into this forum. I love what you're doing and what TIE represents. It so aligns with me personally, and I love listening to your podcast. So thank you for the invitation, first of all. Yeah. And just a little background. So I was born in California, in San Francisco, raised in Northern California. I grew up in, just truth be known, in the 60s, in a small rural town. And I have two other sisters. My dad is from the UK. My mom is a native San Franciscan, and really had a lovely childhood and upbringing. One relevant point to what I'm doing now is when I grew up, my mother was always talking about doing reuse. So we had a garden. She had non-fat dry milk, which I couldn't stand, but because she would reuse the containers. And so the environment that I was brought up in, it was fairly rural, and really it was a lot about not wasting things. And we always had to have leftovers, and sometimes it was like, oh my God, Mom, another leftover evening. So I grew up in Northern California, got married. I have two boys, two young men. Lovely. They're lovely, lovely. And as I got into my career, I worked in various jobs while the kids were younger. When they're busy growing up, you really can't travel a lot. But I eventually started working for IBM at one point. And that was a 20-year journey. It allowed me a lot. It allowed me to travel, work with all different kinds of sectors and clients. I did project and change management for them. And it was really a lovely and insightful journey. Really, Northern California is my home, always has been. I do love it here. I live up in the mountains now. Actually, it just snowed.
You mentioned IBM, 20-year journey. I thought it was 18, so it's a long time. What was the catalyst then to jump ship?
Actually, I didn't jump ship.
Okay.
What happened was I would work on projects, and this particular project, project and change management is typically overhead. And so they laid off a whole group of us. And I had gone through this once before with IBM, and they give you an opportunity to interview within the company. But I said, it's time to go. kids are off the payroll, as I say. And I had already started on this conscious container journey. The other piece of that was the previous 5 years, both my parents had passed away. Mm-hmm. And they were one of my greatest inspirations, both of them, but they had left my sisters and I a little money. So I said, okay, one door's closing, the other one's opening, and let me go see what I can do. That allowed me the space to go through that transition. When you work for a large corporation, you have everything. You got your salary, you got your benefits, you get your stock options. And after I left, I realized how much they actually had provided for me for those 20 years. So very grateful for that time. And the timing was really a bit divine in that I had already started to turn the wheels on what this whole conscious container idea. And so away I went.
So what would be interesting then is let's back up a little bit to 18 years into IBM and you're working there, but something triggered, something happened that you thought, hold on a second, I'm going to juggle this in a full-time job. So, I mean, what happened there?
That's a really great question. I do distinctly remember, I have traveled around the world and seen returnable, refillable systems. They're everywhere except in the United States. Seriously, I'd seen these systems and I've often wondered, why don't we do this here? And I do distinctly remember throwing some glass bottles, whether they're peanut butter jars or mayonnaise jars, wine bottles, in the refillable container and going, why are we doing this? These are perfectly good containers. And wherever that place was, and that was still while I was at the end of that IBM journey, I said, well, why are we doing this? And what can I do about it? And the other piece in my head was, well, this is really great, Caren, but I have no idea about how to start a business, how to run a business. I have no experience in these ecosystems that I'm talking about. So what was brilliant was locally, there's small business development centers. It's a program throughout the United States. And even in our small town here in Truckee, they had a class free where you can go. And they bring local experts in on marketing and how to start a business and entrepreneurship. And you can go attend. And then at the end, they choose several of the companies to go into a pitch competition. So I thought, here we go. Let me just dive in and figure this out. It was fantastic. It really helped frame what it was that I had to go do. Even though I didn't know everything, that was okay. And those resources remained a support system for me as I moved forward. And I actually made the short list for the pitch. Wow. And there were 5 companies. And it was the first time I pitched. And speaking was not my thing. I've definitely developed that skill a bit more. But I got up and totally froze when I was speaking. And it felt really terrible I lost my way completely. Although when I went back to look at it, and even my partner, David, said, it didn't sound as bad as you felt it was. But I totally froze on the stage. It took me a little while. And I said, okay, I have a lot to work on in this space. That really gave me the confidence and the insight to begin to start that process of starting a business. So I started at about the beginning of 2015. The course came about. And while I was in the courses when IBM went through that series of layoffs.
Serendipity is such a funny thing.
Absolutely.
It's so extraordinary how the stars start to align. And in retrospect, you look and you think, okay, the universe was telling me something, That's extraordinary. For our listeners, because obviously, they will have heard the intro to Conscious Container, but bring to life what this is and what was it? And, where have things evolved to?
It's been an amazing journey. I started, like I said, in 2015. Then as I went through that course and then left IBM, or they let me go, so to speak, which was fine. I said, okay, I don't know anything about this category. And what I learned in that course is you need to go through some due diligence. That's usually your first step in regards to if you're going to, create a business, you either need to have the background or you need to go do some due diligence. Yeah. So that's what I spent a year doing, due diligence. Looking in the beverage industry, I went to conferences, I sat on calls about recycling and refillables and looked at industries and really allowed myself that space to understand what the marketplace looked like here, what it looked like around the world. And there's always kind of those milestones where you take that big next step. And so I moved into 2017 and Earth Day was coming up. I looked at David and I go, my partner, I said, that's it. I need to incorporate and launch this business on Earth Day. So that's exactly what I did. So I went to a legal guy I knew in town. And as we incorporated as a benefit corporation. And what that means is that corporations, at least within the United States, whether you're a C or an S Corp, you are bound by making all of your key business decisions based on profit. They're shackled. But in a benefit corporation, the leadership team can balance decision-making between benefit and profit, whether that's environmental benefit, social benefit, right? But what was important for me right from the get-go, I had the opportunity to just make a statement about how we do business, because what this journey has opened up for me is what we're doing is very important. And we'll talk about the refillable system, but how we do business is how things are going to change. And this benefit corporation gives us the platform right from the get-go to follow that vision and that mission.
God, I love that. How we do business is how things are going to change. It's like, I could not agree more. It's the power of the private sector, isn't it? And if everyone has that as the mission of how you do business, then of course things will get better.
It allows the business to make those decisions. Here in the States, Patagonia has always practiced that. Yeah. Yvon Chouinard started the business. He would make decisions on certain items, even though it didn't show profit. He's going, it's the right thing to do. And he would go do it.
So just again, backing up a little bit. So if you can, what is Conscious Container?
So Conscious Container is a business that collects, washes, and resells refillable glass bottles at its core. This system exists, this business system exists around the world already. It did exist here in the United States. It went away, but the value propositions that have occurred over the 5 years I have been building this now are so powerful to get this business rolling. I mean, I can't begin to tell you the transition that the marketplace and the environment and just the whole...
Talk to us about that.
I'll start at the top. And again, these systems exist around the world. So there's a lot of data around how they operate. And really, our customers are beverage and food manufacturers, folks who package. Yeah. And we are focusing in the beverage category, specifically the wine category, for a variety of reasons, and I can talk about those. But really what it boils down to is a refillable glass bottle has an 85% lower carbon footprint than a single-use glass bottle. Now, this is in a mature system. It has a 70% lower carbon footprint than a single-use PET bottle. And it has a 57% lower carbon footprint than a single-use aluminum can. So out the gate, refillable bottles from a carbon emission perspective trump all other substrates. So the environmental value proposition is huge. If you take it another step further, for beverage and food producers, in particular beverage, first of all, this bottle will cost them less money over time because it's circulating, right? And this is proven. That is why Coca-Cola invested $400 million in their PET returnable system in South America. Wow. Because these systems have gross margin in them.
Yeah.
And they are, this is all volume. There's a lot of bottles that have to come through your system. Just really, really quickly, how many, is it 8? How many times can a bottle be reused? So you'll hear different numbers out there. The challenge is there's no real data on this. And actually we're going to innovate in that space. But typically you'll hear people say 15 to 25 times. Oh. I think really where, based on the research we've done, is about 8 to 15 times. Yeah. And where the CO2 footprint and economics really balance out best is probably about 8 turns for that bottle.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought.
On average.
Yeah.
The other pieces that are real drivers, and I think this has evolved over the past 5 years I've been working to create this marketplace essentially, is that the consumers are saying enough, right? Consumer demand. And I give full credit to David Attenborough when he put Blue Planet out there seriously and showed the world the plastics problem. So everybody knows about plastics in the ocean problem, right? So consumers are going, enough already. And what's happening here in the States and in Europe is a leader in this, is that what's happening is producers are becoming, mandated legislation says, you are responsible for your end of life packaging. Because now it's just you and I are paying for when that package goes wherever, from a waste perspective. The other this is a driver where these producers know what's coming down the line. They are going to have to pay for that end of life packaging waste. And what I often say about what a refillable container represents and is that it's not waste, it's an asset. So a lot of what I try to do is kind of change the narrative that says this package is not waste. And what that says to a producer, and they know this is coming. We've had enough conversations. I mean, I've talked with all the big global producers, is they know it's coming. And this is a way to minimize the risk of the mandated packaging legislation. And so they all know that and see the real benefit of that. And then the last thing is the drivers in the marketplace, and we're all experiencing this around the world, is we have supply chain challenges.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it's front and center everywhere around the world. And here in particular in the United States, a good portion of our glass that comes in the United States comes over from Asia into California. And the cost of those bottles and the backlog of supply that's sitting out there in the Pacific Ocean off the coast has raised costs. We're hearing, the cost of goods is 3 to 10 times as much. And so the supply chain of glass in particular is constrained so much so that we, even before we've turned on our business, which is at the beginning of 2022, where we're going to turn on the washing operation, we are getting calls for glass. Hey, do you have glass? Especially in the wine industry.
And actually, I think just really, really quickly, so for our listeners, because obviously I know kind of where you're at, but Conscious Container has not launched yet. You're in the funding stage. Is that right? Maybe just bring that, and then we can talk about Correct. 2022.
Yeah, we have not formally launched the business. We were in an accelerator program with Anheuser-Busch. They invited us in, and we ran an accelerator. It was very much delayed because of the pandemic in 2020. So we ran that accelerator program earlier this year. Quite frankly, the results weren't as good as we would have wanted. The consumer insights side was fantastic, but we didn't really get those results. So what we did is we stepped up our capital raise, and we're looking to close out our seed round that at the end of this year. And we're getting very, very close to doing that. So with that, we will launch the business at the beginning of the year. Okay. And the capital raise was, again, there's all these ecosystems that I dropped into. And that was another one that I'm very comfortable for the most part talking about it now. But that was a journey in itself.
The capital raising.
Raising cap, female founded. We don't have a sexy app in the front end, although we're partnering with others on the consumer side. We're manufacturing heavy CapEx because this equipment is literally millions of dollars. And so it's just been a really interesting journey. I think we could do a whole podcast on the whole female founded, working with venture capital. I mean, California, we sit right in the middle of that ecosystem, right? So anyway, that's a whole nother part of the journey.
I can imagine. Where do you see all of this, and kind of what's the vision?
So startups starting up a business, and even in business, there's been a lot of pivoting back and forth as I've traveled this journey. We started out in the beer category, but quite frankly, beer has moved to aluminum cans. And so we did a little bit of pivot. The gentleman I brought in as our president actually stood up a wine bottle washing operation here in California. He made a very bad bottle washing machine buying decision. It failed right out the gate, and it was late. So we had to shut down that opportunity to actually start it. So one thing that's been really interesting is, if you think about it, wine makers are farmers at heart. They work with the land. And if anybody in any industry is absolutely out front in regards to sustainability and actionable sustainability, it's the wine makers. And you can see this all around the world. They get it. Here in California, they see it, literally. And the wineries, we're sitting right in the heart of the California wine region. Our business is launching in the San Francisco North Bay, and they are putting sustainability standards out there and commitments and targets that are far exceed any other industry as far as I'm concerned. So they get it. And they know that the last mile is the carbon emissions in a wine bottle. So anytime I sit or moderate on panels in the wine industry about sustainability, and I'm called in quite a bit these days, is the question that looms over is, what are you going to do about that 18 to 30% CO2 footprint in the glass bottle? So the largest portion of the carbon emission in a bottle of wine is in the manufacturing of the glass alone. And so we say they've been trying to lightweight, that's only 4%. But when you look at a refillable bottle, I gave you the statistics earlier, is it just trumps it And so they are all saying we need to move into a returnable system here. And so we have the most sustainable winery. They're fairly large here in the North Bay. They are going to be working with us. We are also going to be, we're going to be launching a pilot. They're going to also do a test market with one of their brands in the San Francisco North Bay, but they are the world's largest.
That is fantastic. And so that means that you will be looking after the glass container part of the process, the operations. And so they're looking at the wine, and you come in with the glass and the ability to refill it.
Right. So we'll eventually probably be selling refillable glass bottles, but what we're going to be doing is as we launch the business, we're just going to collect the wastage bottles used in the wine industry, which is about 1.5%. So we're going to grab those bottles instead of going to recycling. A portion of those are going to be washed and refilled and sold to the secondary marketplace, which is absolutely screaming for glass, right? They're already reaching out to us, say, hey, do you have glass bottles?
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah. That is fantastic. Talk to us about the sort of the surprises and challenges that you faced in this journey. You touched on a few of them. I mean, even just female founder, and you sort of threw that in, and like that could be a whole podcast. Good and bad, but maybe you can touch on them, just because our listeners, we have such a mix of people who, are really passionate about the environment, passionate about gender equality, passionate, they might be entrepreneurs. I think it's just really interesting to hear from someone who's been, you've been doing this for a while now, and you've seen a lot.
It has been an absolutely amazing journey. And I have grown as an individual throughout this process, for the challenges and for the high notes and the low notes, right? As you go through this. Yeah. Some interesting things have appeared during this process. So in all transparency, I started this journey at 55. I'm 61 right now. I said, I'm going to give myself 10 years to do this because I wanted to allow that space, and I had no idea what I was getting into. And what's interesting is I have 2 adult boys now. One of them is kind of in the startup industry. The other one is a computer science engineer. And what's been really interesting is watching my children watch their mother, who really should be retiring at this point, start working in a startup, trying to get this going. Yeah. And they're concerned at first, like, how are you going to, pay for things? Obviously, I had a little bit of a safety net with some money my parents had left my sisters and I, but watching them really begin to transition and looking at me as more of an individual, right? And how the 2 of them, even my older one still says, when are you going to go get a job, Mom? But my other son, who's startup, he actually started to ask questions about what I was doing because he's familiar with the startup. He's worked in several of them. And so actually offering advice and asking a lot of questions. Have you thought about this? Watching me go through that process when that's not maybe the normal thing for, your 60-year-old mother to be working on. So I think that has been really insightful, watching them and myself go through that transition, and that you can do anything at any age. Yeah. And I keep saying with Fortune magazine, do we have the 60 over 60? Right? I really enjoyed that personal transition with them. Yeah, I think one of the challenging thing is, as you know, is moving with the ebbs and flows and looking back at yourself and being a leader and how you need to lead, with your team, my inspiration and listening and being humble, also while inspiring them and keeping them moving, because my team is working on sweat equity. Yeah. And so I used to call it at IBM when I would manage projects is managing without authority. Yeah. Right. I would be managing people who didn't report to me. And so how I navigated through all of that, the ups and downs, there's definitely that's been a really, I've learned so much about myself.
Yeah. Now you talk about you needing to be inspiring for your team. Who inspires you?
Well, as I said, my parents are really probably my biggest inspiration. And my mother was way ahead of her time. She didn't get married till she was 29. She had a master's from UC Berkeley. she wanted to be a journalist. She was a journalist all through her younger life. And when she got to Berkeley, they said, well, women aren't journalists. You can't get a master's in that. You can go be a teacher, an English teacher. She was ended up being an English and French teacher. But she was so far ahead of her time and just a real inspiration. And she made sure that my sisters and I, that we did go to college. And she understood that because she went through some challenging things with her parents. And she felt education was really important for women to make sure you were self-sustainable, so to speak. And there was a whole lot of other things. And my father was from Britain. He was from Liverpool. He's a Scouser. Yeah. And he grew up extremely poor. And he left home and he was in the British Army for a while and traveled around the world. And then he said, I want a better life. And so he immigrated through Canada, actually, into the United States and met my mom in San Francisco. And that's where they got together. And I just always admired his sense of adventure. And that's definitely deeply instilled in myself. In particular, when I traveled to the UK for the first time in 1972, I just blew me away. And forever then, I was just inspired by travel and people and different ways of living and thinking, and to be very open-minded. So
I can relate to that because obviously my accent's North American, but I also have my family in the UK. And I as well I felt such a connection to the UK the whole time growing up. And whenever I lived in Canada, but I have to say my heart just always felt there, or South Africa, or and other places as well. I can relate. Yeah, I mean, we're coming to the end of the podcast. Is there anything else that I haven't asked you that you'd like to tell our listeners?
This whole journey and life's journey, I believe very strongly in trusting yourself and trusting your intuition. I have traveled my whole life. In particular, it's come into play as I've been building and starting up this business, is really allow yourself the time and space to be guided. I don't always have the answer. A lot of times I don't, but just staying open and creating space for what's next. Don't hang on to, I'll have a really challenging day where someone comes back and says, hey, we're not going to invest in you, or whatever it may be, is to feel that, allow that to pass through, but then let it go. This is a journey about constantly letting go so you can allow the right things to come in. And I believe very, very strongly in, following your heart and listening to what is important to you and discovering as you go along that journey. And especially as women in this world, IBM was very much a man's world when that whole corporate, structure is, we need more space to allow for creativity and allowing intuition to guide us. And to really, sometimes I'll have a bad point and I'll just sit quietly for a little bit and allow that to pass through so that I can continue with really what the larger vision is. I mean, our vision at Conscious Container is a world of reuse economies and cultures. That's the vision. And you'll never achieve that vision, but that's where your North Star is. And one of my favorite other pieces is, and I saw this quote, and it was from Jane Fonda, who was definitely an activist in her own right, is coming into conversations with people and be interested, not interesting. Ask questions. And this whole journey has been about me asking questions, being very authentic. And people, I cannot begin to tell you, Philippa, how people have supported me. I have felt so supported because I come to them authentically. I don't know this, or can you help me with this? And that part has been amazing. When you come with an open heart and authentically, we're trying to do the right thing, the universe just opens up.
God. I mean, I've taken a lot from this conversation. I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, yeah, absolutely. And the importance of just stopping. I do need to do that more, 100%. I really need to do that. We're with sort of two young children at home and kind of trying to sort of slot everything in and running off to sort of karate class or whatever. And you're like, oh my God, I need to sort of do this. And it's that time to just reflect. And you need to make that time. You do, because like you say, there's so many ups and downs running your own thing. And particularly in the space that should be a priority, which is the future of this planet. And it should just be so obvious, but it's so much harder. And you need to have that resilience, and you need to have that self-belief, but the resilience, but also that love and the sort of, okay, pick myself up, let's just keep going. And thank God for people like you that are doing it, because there's obviously a business case for it, and there's an environmental case for it, and it just makes sense. And so it just needs to happen.
Absolutely. I listened to the first hour opening of the COP26 session in Glasgow, and David Attenborough. I would invite everybody to go take a look at that man and what he's done, and how he brings forward the fact that it's now, and we need to move forward. And he is a big inspiration to me.
Yeah.
I mean, he's 95 years old. He gets up on stage, no notes. It's just absolutely inspiring. And I look for those inspirations because he is so spot on, and you can go do it. It's about resilience, like you said, and take them as learnings, not failures.
Richard Jones, who is definitely going to be listening to this at some point, he's a very, very old friend of the family, good friend of my dad's. So my dad's since passed away, but I grew up with Richard. And he sent me, actually following one of my previous podcasts, he sent me this, it's the story of the starfish. And I'm not going to be doing it justice because he sort of sent it on an email. But basically the idea is there was a boy and he went to the beach and there was a whole beach full of starfish. And he was one by one putting these starfish back in the sea. And someone came across him and said, the beach is full of these starfish. Like, what are you doing? And he said, well, at least I'm saving the starfish that I can save. I won't be able to do all of them, but I'm doing my bit. And, I think a lot of people right now are probably in the face of COP26. There's just a lot that everyone's facing. A lot of people aren't even watching the news anymore because it just feels a little bit too much. And I think it's so important that all of us just take a step back and we think, okay, what can I do? What can I do with the power that I have in the situation that I'm in? What can I do? And I think your mom, as far ahead that she was, she taught you this however many years ago, which is crazy, right? And it's sort of that light bulb moment went off as you're at IBM and you're like, hold on a second. This is crazy. My mom's been, she was talking about that however many years ago, and I need to do this. And you're doing it. And I'm doing it in my way. And so many people, and I think that's the thing. I think rather than feeling overwhelmed, we just need to remind ourselves it is possible. We can do what we can within the power that we have. Resilience, taking that time to reflect. And if everyone does that, and back to what you said as well, it's the way you do business. If the way you do business makes sense, then the world will be better. God, there's so much that you've talked about today that's been so inspiring. I am so, so honored to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Well, it's actually been a pleasure. And we have a connection already. So, and I love the work that you do. And it is about inspiration. I love to be inspired. I love inspiring others because we have so much possibilities.
Yeah.
And I love what you said. Just do what you can within your own space.
Coming back to Conscious Container very quickly before we sign off, what can you give the sort of general consumer as an option to think about in this space?
I did run many pilots. And as we turn this business on, so there's two things. As we turn this business on, what I found out in the past is people will change their brand. They'll move to a different brand of kombucha that's doing when they know what they're doing. So once we turn this engine on, this business on, then we'll be doing marketing out with these companies, co-marketing to consumers. So as we move forward, pay attention and look for this, and we will begin to get a lot of press. We already have some press. And then on the other side, we were successful this year in moving legislation. And we got a lot of press for that. Legislation in California that said a returnable bottle can now flow within our redemption system. We have a deposit system here in California. And so as we begin to move forward, consumers can participate I'm going to go buy this bottle of wine, or I'm going to go buy this particular brand of kombucha because it's in a refillable, returnable bottle. So consumers are really, quite frankly, waiting for us to turn this on.
Totally.
Right? And so when we turn it on, it's participation. If you're cool with moving to another brand, that's returnable.
Do you have once this is turned on, so for people who are living, I mean, I have listeners who are in the California area, in the same way that you would have the three arrows for recycling, is there something that you've created for returnable?
So what we'll probably do at first, because of how we're launching the business, is our customers, our wineries, the wine industries where we're launching, is Bruce did this in the past, or the gentleman who did this before, is they'll put neck tags and say, this is a bottle that has been washed and refilled. So from a marketing perspective, eventually the consumer will see that. Eventually we're going to have branded industry standard bottles. That's where this needs to go. So the wine industry, there'll be 10 industry standard bottles based on your varietal, and we're looking to brand those bottles. Yeah. Actually, the glass, because we do work with glass manufacturers. We're starting at sort of with the low-hanging fruit, but I can tell you the vision for the next 10 years is this: we are going to scale. This is a big scale proposition. And we talk to all the big global producers. They want to do this. All of them that I talk to.
This is so exciting. We need to have a follow-up podcast in like a year at the end of like 2022. And we're going to have a follow-up podcast. You're going to tell me where things are at. I'm so excited for you. We have come to the end, but honestly, you are such an inspiration. I'm so honored to have you. Thank you so much for your time, and good luck. I mean, this is an exciting moment for you. You're going to make your mom and dad proud.
You're going to make me choke up here. My bladder at my eyeballs, as we've talked about before. So no, lovely. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share and hopefully inspire, because it's what I always look for.
Yeah. Amazing. Listen, all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, my dear.
Hey everyone, this is Philippa again. I hope you enjoyed listening. Now this is your chance to get involved with Thai. If you work in the commercial world, whatever your profession, your position, or your experience, then Thai could be for you. You may have been in business for decades, but have always felt there's another way. Or you may just have a few years experience, but want to do more. Equally, if you want to create game-changing employees and see your company impact the world, we've got you covered. Thai has never been more necessary than right now, and you can be a part of it. Reach out to me at philippa@theinternationalexchange.co.uk and I can tell you more. Or join the Thai Accelerator info session for more information. apply.thaiaccelerator.com. Better leaders, better companies, better world. I'm your host, Philippa White. This podcast has been co-produced by Berna Vieira and me, music by Berna Vieira, and artwork by Kelps Vahais. I hope we'll meet again soon.